Hey, what up, guys? It's me again. Welcome to the This Is My Moment podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Mitchell. And here at This Is My Moment, we love having a good time. We love smiling. And we love meeting new people. And you know what? It's season 2, baby. Let's go get it.
There ain't no stopping it. This is my moment. Join the movement. We bringing people together, bringing positivity, making changes for the better. Cause it's all.
I have someone on the other end that I woke up thinking about talking to. It's gonna be phenomenal because I think she got a lot of stories that I want to hear. Introduce yourself to the family.
Yeah, I'm Emmy Montgomery. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I have kind of a very strange background in that I've been a sportscaster and a print reporter and a sports official for 40. I was a sports official for 40 years. I was a teacher. I'm an author. It's been quite a ride. I hope there's more of a ride in my future, but I've done a lot of different things.
We were talking off camera, and I was telling you that I researched you and I saw all this stuff and I was like, oh, this gonna be a good one. So let's get right into it. I want to know, first off, how did you get into sports? Like what gave you that?
When I was 5, my parents took me ice skating. There was an ice rink near where I grew up, and I remember being 5 and getting around the rink, and I grew up as an ice skater. I was actually an ice dancer, so I skated with a partner. I was terribly mediocre. I was too big to be a skater because, trust me, you wouldn't want to lift me over your head. So, but it gave me a love of sport. I also grew up in an arena where we shared ice with hockey players. And to be honest, today, I'd play hockey. I would have been a good hockey player. But, girls didn't have a choice back then. They didn't say I could play hockey. So I grew up and hockey became my favorite sport. And so I had visions for me as an ice dancer to have gold medals in the Olympics, which were never going to happen. You have those dreams when you're young. Then you come to your senses and go, that's not happening. Then I went to high school and I was on the broadcast crew. And what that meant is we had a half hour every morning to do announcements. And, we had a show that we did. And one day the hockey players handed me an announcement. And I went up to where we did the broadcast crew. And I was the only girl on the crew. And I said, I'm going to read the hockey announcement. So I went looking through the announcements and picked all the sports. And the guys stopped me and they went, you can't read the sports, you're a girl. And I went, well, why not? And because I know more about hockey than you guys do. And so I started with that. And then the teacher came in and I'd been in a lot of the school plays and he was the director. He goes, if Annie wants to read the sports, Annie can read the sports, leave her alone. So the guys were mad, but I would read the sports. So every day I came in to get the sports. And unbeknownst to me, they decided to give me a theme song, and it was Mission Impossible. Dun, 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 that one. And then they started calling me Big Ann. They said, okay, now here's Big Ann with the sports. And they did that to humiliate me, but I liked it. So, it made perfect sense to me when my mother came to me and said, so what do you want to be? You have to go to college and we need a college. So what do you want to be when you grow up? And I went, a sportscaster. And she went, don't be ridiculous. I'm trying to have a serious conversation with you.
I thought you was playing.
It was the 1970s. It was 1972. There weren't women sportscasters. My mom was very rational. There weren't any. And then I went to college and all my professors patted me on the head and said, you'll never be a sportscaster. You're a woman.
Wow.
And graduated with a degree in communications and journalism, moved to Washington, D.C., couldn't get an interview anywhere, became a waitress and a bartender. A very strange thing happened. One night, my aunt, who was more like a sister, took me to see the Washington Capitals play. And she brought a friend with her, a man I'd never met before. And during the course of the game, he mentioned that he was an amateur ice hockey official. For kids, a kid's hockey official. And he's saying, we just don't have enough referees. It's terrible. Kind of like today, we don't have enough referees. And my aunt goes, well, Annie can skate. And I went, yes, I can. And he said, why don't you be a referee?
Yeah.
And I never mentioned that I'd never been on hockey skates. Hadn't been. And there's a difference. I took the test. They sent me to go do a game at 6 in the morning. And these are like 5-year-olds, they've got their jerseys at their knees, the little sawed-off sticks, their little helmets are tilted. And I went out there to take my first face-off and had never worn these skates before. And I went to take my face-off and I fell. And I fell right smack in the middle of the ice when I leaned over to take the face off with these little tiny kids, because figure skates have toe picks. Those are landing jumps, and lazy skaters like me would just dig my toe pick into the ice and pop up if I fell. Hockey skates didn't have those. I couldn't get up. I fell down 3 times trying to get up. And all these little children are staring at me, and I'm like mortified. However, on the ride home from that first game, and I don't remember the rest of the game, I had this epiphany that told me the only people that really truly understand the games are the officials. Because does anyone else read a rule book? Of course not. Coaches don't read rule books, players don't read rule books. So I decided to take 5 years of my life and become certified in the 5 main team spectator sports: football, baseball, ice hockey, soccer, and basketball.
Okay.
I believed if I did that I could convince some news director that I understood sports.
Yeah.
And that maybe this forward-thinking news director would hire me. And that is exactly what happened.
Okay.
Except in the middle of all that, my family was horrified. My parents had an intervention with me. They came down and said, "We'll put you back to school so you can do something useful." Like, Mom, I have a plan. I'm going to be a sportscaster because I'm a referee. My family didn't speak to me for a couple of years because they thought I was out of my mind.
Goodness gracious. Let me ask you a question. So, first off, that's funny. I didn't know it was a difference in the skates. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's you.
So I coach high school basketball and some professionals in Germany.
Have I offended you?
Nah, you didn't. But I'm gonna tell you what. I know. Listening to you, I know that it's very few because I did it. Like, I wanted to know what I could get away with and what points that I could fight. Right. So I'd like to have my guns loaded if you would. But that's pretty neat. I like that. Good for you, man.
The thing that amazes me is I cannot tell you how many games I've worked, like, let's say football, Friday night, and some coach is screaming, "That catch was uncatchable." I'm like, "Coach, that's a Sunday rule. That's not a Friday rule. We don't have that rule." They don't get it. They mix college rules and pro rules, and it's the same in basketball, the same in a lot of sports, that they don't really, and I understand, but to me, a coach should read the rule book. Yeah, so that when you're screaming at me and making me look bad, you really better know you're right, because usually you're not.
Yeah, a lot of times. You know what? I've never been, I've been the kind of coach that in semi-pros, I was a little more aggressive. When I got to high school, coach varsity, I always wanted to be a pretty good example. So I never got a tech. 4 years I coached, I never got a tech, never got kicked out.
I like that.
But you know what I did? I never disrespected the refs. I was never that guy. I always waited till it was one-on-one, and then I explained my part, but I used the information that was legit, straight out the book. So I'd read it, and I knew. So when I game planned, I knew what I was going to do. So I knew if I was, nowadays I teach my girls how to Euro step. So we do the Euro step, and I make sure that I looked at the rule book, the same one that these high school refs was looking at. So I was like, okay, this is the deal. Here it says this. Oh, coach, okay, yeah. Well, okay. Now I prove my point. So I win, right? And I think that it also gave me a level of respect from the referees to where I actually took the time to understand what they were doing instead of just yelling at them.
I know that, for example, when a coach would yell at me about an interference call 40 yards downfield, I'm like, you don't want to ever say it's not my call, but I'm with the quarterback. My job is protecting him to make sure we don't have holding. I have no idea what my team tells me down there. But when they come to me and say they have interference, I must accept that. And for a coach to scream and yell at me over an interference call, I have no control over that. I do also agree that sometimes we make mistakes, just like sometimes a coach puts a bad play in, or the quarterback fumbles the ball. Sometimes we make a mistake. And I believe it's my job to go to the coach and say, you know what, you're right, coach. I'm not sure we got a good look at that. We're going to do better next time. And let me tell you, they shut up right away. As soon as you say, hey, you know, I think you might be right, but we can't fix that. Or if we can, we do. But generally, some of those things you can't fix. So if you admit, look, I'm a human being like you are, my crew might have made a mistake here. We can fix it. We will. If we can't, hey, I'm sorry, man. We'll do better.
Yeah, that's all you can do. How difficult was it for you to break in? So you said in the 70s, and you're right, it wasn't a lot of females.
There were none.
Referees, coaching, none of that. How difficult was it for you to break into, first off, the casting, the refereeing? Like, how difficult was it to break into a male-dominated sport?
Officiating was, I don't know. I always thought I could do things. So it didn't occur to me I was being an idiot when I called up local officiating associations. My first one was baseball. Hockey, I'm sorry. But then I went right to baseball and I said, I'd like to be an umpire. And the guy starts like laughing. He goes, really? I'm like, yeah. He said, well, we have a meeting next week. Why don't you come? I'm like, okay. And they tortured me in the meetings. I mean, he said, this guy who ran the class was a former DC police officer.
Yeah.
And had been an umpire forever. Now, initially, he said all kinds of rude things that I will not repeat here.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. He tried to chase me out with foul language. Yeah. And I wanted to tell him, you know, Jim, I lived in a girls' dormitory for 4 years, and you should hear them talk. You think you're scaring me, you're not. But I stuck it out, and that guy became my mentor. He was what he did. He was great. And he kind of took care of me after that, because I made him laugh and he realized he couldn't run me off. And I sat down and explained to him what I was trying to do, that I believe if you're going to be a sports reporter, you need to understand the games. Somebody's statistics from 10 years ago, which is what people say to me. Well, what was this guy's batting average in 1987? I don't care. I can look that up, but you need to understand the game, the flows of the way the games flow, what might be the next call. And as an official, I learned those things. And that man backed me up. But every time I joined a new group, it's the same. You know, honestly, I'd like to tell you it's easier for women now in officiating, but unless you're officiating women's sports, like if I did girls basketball and softball, as one of my former bosses said, you know, if only you officiated women's sports, you might get somewhere.
Wow.
So did I ever get the state playoff? No. Yeah. No. Did guys want to work with me? No. They would constantly throw me off their crews because they'd say, we're never going to get the 5A state championship with you. You're a woman. And they were right. And I hated it for it. But that's what made me become a referee, because I went, screw it, I'm going to make my own crew. I stood up in a group of 450 men and said, I'm going to be a referee this year. If you want to work with me, I'll be in that corner. And some men came up to me, but most would not. So I got a lot of guys on my crews early on that nobody else wanted.
Yeah.
And I ended up being a white hat for 24 years. And I miss it desperately, that part. But I ended up with guys who worked with me for 10, 12, 13 years. So we worked hard. We laughed. We did the best job we could. We all became friends, but they knew they were never going to get the top games because of me. And they didn't.
Wow. How did that, what was the motivation though? So like, how was it hard to stay positive? Because you know, I can't say blackballed or ostracized, but kind of like they like, if you work with Annie, you're not going nowhere.
You know what? I'm a positive human being. Every year I believe this will be the year that we'll get the games.
Yeah.
And most of the groups I work with, they wouldn't even come and observe me.
Wow.
I mean, they wouldn't want. For 6 years, my crew went unobserved. And I stood up at a meeting, it was just a meeting of the referees, the crew chiefs.
Yeah.
And I said, what's the deal, guys? It's been 6 years. How do you determine who's going to get the games if you're not out watching us? And I asked every referee in the group to raise their hand if their crews hadn't been observed. And about a third of them did. So not all the guys are treated equally. And my attitude was, I love football, I love baseball, I really hated basketball, didn't want to do softball. And so what if I did guys games? So what? The thing that was astonishing to me, though, mostly was that I didn't quit officiating when I got into television. I always thought it was just a means to an end, that as soon as I got in TV, I'd quit, and I couldn't quit. I miss that. I don't miss TV, but I miss football, and sometimes I miss baseball, but I never want to get hit with another baseball. When you have you been hit with a baseball?
Nah, not my thing.
I know this makes me sound kind of girly, but let me tell you something. It's awful. And when I go to games with people and there's a line drive into the seats and they're all reaching to catch it, I'm hiding under the chair. I would get hit and have horrible bruises on me. One time, a woman came up to me. She goes, "Oh my God, that's horrible." I said, "I know." And she said, "We can get the bastard who did that." I said, "No, it's a baseball. I got hit with a baseball." And she said, "You don't have to lie. We'll get him." I'm like, no, really. It's okay. So yeah, I don't want to be hit with baseball anymore.
They thought you was getting physically abused.
They did. You get hit with a baseball, and I've taken, I don't know, 50 shots at least. It's miserable. And they always hit you where you don't have any padding. I've had rotator cuff surgery twice because there's no padding here. So foul balls, screwed up pitches. I've had rotator cuff surgery twice, which is a really bad operation. So yeah, that was baseball. So I missed the game sort of, but no, I don't know. I'd rather be hit by 3 football players.
So we know now we have female referees in basketball. I've seen them in football, the umps. And how does that make you feel, if it does, to know that you were part of that opening culture for women to get into these male-dominated sports, and now to see them at the championships and the big games? How does that make you feel, or does it make you feel away?
I'm glad that we've made some progress, but it's still very sad. There are no women in baseball. I don't even know if there are women in the minor leagues anymore. There might be, but officiating is not brain surgery.
Yeah,
isn't. And that it has taken this long to get women into football is absurd. It's absurd. Part of it is, I know why they're doing it. The NFL wants to make sure they're appealing to women. Why? Because women buy the vast majority of all their products. They buy the jerseys and the shirts and the hats for their men, for their sons. They are the ones who are buying things. So the NFL desperately wants to appeal to them.
Okay.
The stuff they do is so absurd. I mean, for example, they now have in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they have a women in football section.
I did know that.
I know, because it's ridiculous. The woman who, Shannon Easton, was the woman who they called up during the official strike, and she was the first woman to officiate a game in the NFL. And because they had no officials, they took her hat and her whistle and put it in the Hall of Fame, but they didn't give her a job. Okay. There's also a woman in the Pro Football Hall of Fame because she was the first woman to coach an NFL game. However, they don't point out it was with the Arizona Cardinals. She was an unpaid intern and they never hired her. They have the headphones. They did a game, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, where they had a woman play-by-play and a woman doing color. And why I can't think of their names right now, I can't. Anyway, when you turned on the game, no, it was Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. You had to go to some weird little small station to find the women who weren't even at the game. But in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, you'll find their headphones on display. So, yeah. I think we could have made a lot more progress if they really wanted to. In all of these sports. And of course, in basketball, women play basketball. It's not that big a stretch to have women's basketball officials. Softball, women's soccer, that you could do. It's men's sports that don't accept us.
Right.
And that bothers me. I was still officiating. I retired in 2019 and I did my last football season. It's not any better than it was then. And so it frustrates me because, there's a dearth of officials around the country. We have high school games. We have to have our Friday night games on Thursday now because we don't have enough crews. And that's all over the country. There aren't enough people doing Pop Warner. There aren't enough officials anywhere because of all the grief they take.
Yeah.
And I asked several times, why don't you try to appeal to women to do that? You're missing out on half the population. Go ahead, let's get some women involved. They don't.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's much better than it was 40 years ago.
It sounds like to me, it's we used to call it surface clean. You shine it up on top, but everything else underneath is still the same. That's kind of
it is.
That's kind of sound like what you're getting at. Let me ask you a question. So you talked about doing your broadcast. You talked about your refereeing. You're an author also. How many books have you written?
I have written 9. 5 are published. 2 are in a drawer that will never come out. And I'm in the process of trying to sell 2 more, but my agent of 14 years retired in December and I need a new agent. So I don't have one right now.
What does your work-life balance look like before all this retirement? Like, you're doing a lot. Like, it sounds like you were busy.
This is why I'm struggling in retirement. I'm used to running everywhere. I'm used, I became a teacher at 45. When I was deemed not pretty enough to be in front of a camera anymore. Wow. And that's what happens to women in television. I worked for 5 TV stations. I was the sports director. I anchored, I reported, I anchored SportsCenter at ESPN. And I was I worked for the Phoenix Suns. I did their pregame show and their halftime shows and call-in shows afterwards. And then I was almost 40 and it was over. I couldn't get a job anywhere in the country. And it's I should have known, it's just like being an athlete. One day you're on top of the world and the next day nobody's interested. And I was crushed. I really was. I mean, I did a lot of feeling sorry for me for a while and it was stupid, and so eventually at 42, I went back to college and I got my teaching certificate and I ended up teaching in an the most inner city school here in Phoenix. Drugs, gangs, a mess. And what I learned was that I was a brat. I was a spoiled brat because I thought I had a hard life. No one would put me on TV anymore. Poor me. Right. So, I ended up teaching 20 years in that school. I taught journalism. I taught history sometimes. I taught communication skills. So, I mean, I would get up, go to school, go to a game at night. I worked out my entire life. Or if I didn't have a game, I'd go work out. I was a swimmer for 40 years. I mean, I swam. I'm a lap swimmer. So I was working out, 5-6 days a week. And then in the summer, I would have summers off from school and I wrote books in the summertime.
Wow.
So I am very used to that kind of pace, and retirement is very hard because I don't know how to calm down. My family keeps saying, could you please calm down? I'm like, I feel like I should be running. And I so looked forward to not having to teach anymore simply because of the alarm clock issue. I've never been a morning person. So it was great. I went to work at 3 PM. I was off at 11. That worked for me. Getting up at 5:30 in the morning, I hated my life. And my high school students would stagger in miserable. I said, look, I'm as miserable as you are right now.
You say, join the party.
So I was happy to smash my alarm clock, but it is very strange trying to figure out how to plan your day. And I still am a huge, sadly, for good or worse, I'm a big consumer of the news. I still read the old-fashioned newspaper every day. I watch the news. When it drives me crazy, I turn to cooking shows. But I write. I also have a website. I blog. So I write articles every week because I'm still a reporter in my head. But it is odd, this world I'm in right now. And I can write books more, and I do. But it's difficult. It really is, because I ran my whole life from one thing to the next.
Yeah. So I also saw that you had a lot of hobbies also on top of this. And this is just a few. You had a rock collecting, is that correct?
Yes.
Scuba diving.
Yep.
Guitar.
Yep.
Let me see, and theater.
Yeah, I don't do theater so much anymore, though I am in an improv class right now, which is fun. I'd love to do stand-up. I think that'd be great. But I've been a rock collector since I was a child. And in fact, it was funny when I moved to ESPN my mother was at the house that I rented, and somebody from ESPN was there as my stuff was being delivered. And the guy pulled her aside and said, "We don't understand what this is." And it said on the moving manifest that they were moving 500 pounds of rocks. And my mother went, "Oh, I'm sure that's right." And it is. I have 400 rocks in my living room. Okay, I've been a rock collector my whole life. I traveled to rock. Wow. And here in Arizona, where nobody would have stopped here if it hadn't been for mines, copper, gold, and silver. Until air conditioning, nobody lived here. It was really small. So that is one of my most favorite things to do. And one of my sons, my youngest son, is the only family member that is really into the rocks. So everybody else humors me. They go sometimes, but it's a wonderful hobby, and it's like digging for treasure. So I love rocks are my thing, and scuba diving is fabulous. You're gonna think I'm a brat here, but I have a home in St. Croix on the Virgin Islands.
Not mad.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, man, being able, and I don't know how you feel about this, but growing into the person that can go to St. Croix when they want, or being able to just get away and live off grid in a place where you don't have to worry about an alarm clock and still be like the best version of yourself. That to me is success at the highest level.
Well, we planned for 20 years to do this.
Yeah.
And we've been very fortunate and have worked very hard.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of like a brat mentioning it to people or showing them pictures. They're like, "That's where you live?" I'm like, "Yeah, we do." Our desert is magnificent here. It really is. But I've been here 30 years and I need a change. And to me, I'd rather walk to the end of my porch and there's the Caribbean. So, that's what's keeping me going since, as I said, I've given up most everything that I've done here. And the other problem for me in retirement is that I'm limited now. See, when you get to be old like me, remember when they told us sports were good for us?
Yeah.
Yeah, they lied. Okay. Everything's been MRI'd, broken. I've had broken bones. I've got stitches. I could do those movie scenes where, I'm pointing out my stitches, really good scars, and almost all from sports.
Yeah.
I can't do all the things I used to do, and that's really hard when you get older and go, "Oh crap, I can't do that thing anymore."
I gotta have some fun with you. Here's the deal. At the end of every show, I have 3 questions that Ashley didn't send to you, and she didn't send them to you on purpose.
Oh, that's fine. I don't need you to send them to me.
All right, so here we go. Last season, I started playing this game with my guests, and I didn't have a name. So this season, I call it Pick One. I'm going to give you some options. I'm going to give you some choices. You have to only choose one or one sentence, all right? So here's the deal. Okay. You ready?
I'm answering in one sentence?
Or no, so this first question, you have to choose one between 2 things. Okay? First question. One sport to ref. Everything else has to go away. What sport are you reffing?
Football.
Easy. You can only keep one. Rock collecting, scuba diving, theater, guitar. What are you keeping?
God. Rock collecting.
I thought you liked scuba diving.
I loved scuba diving, but you only gave me one chance. I can't pick up rocks.
Oh, okay. I give you the phrase, "This is my moment." What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
This is my moment. You mean in the future or the past?
This is your moment right now. What are you doing? What's the first thing come to your mind?
This is my moment would be me accepting the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay from one of my own books.
Okay.
Okay.
And we're done. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. So here's the thing.
Well, thank you.
No, you did well. I knew I was. I was over here smiling and giddy like a schoolboy. I love it. But I have to close out the show. Please don't move. I'm going to come right back to you, okay? Hey, guys, here's the deal. You don't have to settle if you don't want to settle. If you're the first to do it, be the first to do it. Own it and grow it. Don't let anyone tell you what you cannot do. If you want it, Go get it. Bottom line. And then, like I say, go get it.
Join the movement, we bringing people together, bringing positivity, making changes for the better. Cause it's all about growth, all about success. We wanna see you rise, wanna see you at your best.